Go on. Endless stuff, yeah.
You should have a fluorescent marker.
Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on DD India, where we'll be talking about the first state visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Brazil in almost 6 decades. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Brazil's capital, Brasilia, after having attended the BRICS summit in Rio, and we will be holding talks, in fact, with his host, Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, to take ties with Latin America's largest and resource-rich nation forward. It is already India's largest trading partner in South America, Gautam. I'm Unman Bhattacharya.
And I'm Gautam Roy. Brazil and India ties go back centuries through the colonial era. But the inflection point was during the 90s when both their economies started opening up. And since 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has prioritized expanding India's engagement with Latin America, and Brazil has been a key part of that exercise. A strategic partnership was forged in 2006, and the first 2+2 dialogue also took place just last year. Well, there's much more in store during the course of the day, and we'll have our correspondents on the ground with experts joining us to throw more light on it in India and Brazil, Global South partners.
Let's get started. So after concluding a productive and successful BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is now in the capital city of Brasilia on a state visit to Brazil.
Yes, and on arrival, Prime Minister Modi was warmly welcomed by José Museo, Minister of Defense of Brazil, at the airport. The welcome was made delightfully musical by the traditional Brazilian samba reggae performance.
In Brasilia, Prime Minister Modi will hold bilateral discussions with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on broadening the strategic partnership between the two nations in areas of mutual interest, and that includes trade, defense, energy, space, technology, agriculture, health, and people-to-people linkages.
Well, that thunderous, percussive reception was just the beginning. The PM was also given a grand traditional welcome in Brasilia.
Acharya Jonas Massetti and his associates.
As you can see, a lot of people of the Indian diaspora, which is about, well, really small considering Brazil is a large country geographically, area-wise. The Indian diaspora is not that extensive in Brazil, about 4,000 strong. And mostly concentrated in Sao Paulo, but some of them are also there in Rio as well as in Manaus. And that's the Acharya there, Acharya Jonas Massetti and his associates, who recited the Shiv Tandav Stotram, while the indigenous people of Brazil's Amazon rainforest also chanted local mantras. And the Prime Minister also took to social media platform X and put across the kind of welcome that he got with this particular post, and I quote, "The Indian community accorded a memorable welcome, once again highlighting how passionate our diaspora is and how connected they remain with their roots." And that's a Bharatnatyam performance that the PM also witnessed when he arrived at his place of stay in Brasilia.
Absolutely, Gautam. And Bharatnatyam is one Indian traditional dance which is quite popular there.
Well, it's a classical form of dance, along with several others. This is from the southern part of the country. India is well known for different classical forms from all directions, the 4 directions of the country. Apart from that, there are a lot of folk dances and arts as well, and even Brazil has a very rich tradition there.
Now let's come come to the bilateral relationship between India and Brazil. That's based on a common global vision, shared democratic values, and a commitment to foster economic growth with social inclusion for the welfare of people of both countries.
And sustainable development as well. India and Brazil share close and multifaceted relations, which were elevated to a strategic partnership, as I mentioned earlier, in 2006. Both the countries cooperate closely in multilateral forums such as BRICS, IBSA, G20, G4, International Solar Alliance, Global Biofuel Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, that's CDRI, United Nations, World Trade Organization, UNESCO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's WIPO, you name it, and India and Brazil are there.
As strategic partners, India and Brazil have several institutional mechanisms to coordinate bilateral relations, and they include a joint commission meeting, that's at the level of foreign ministers, then a strategic dialogue at the level of national security advisors or NSAs, there's foreign office consultations at the secretary level, there's a trade monitoring mechanism or called TMM between the commerce ministers. So pretty intensive and extensive consultations keep happening between both the sides at various levels.
Yes, these institutional arrangements basically tell us that all the major bases have been covered, but there are many other engagements as well, ranging from in the field of agriculture to technology, startups as well. There's a bridge that has been put in place, and if you speak of culture, education, exchange programs, even diplomats coming in training in India from Brazil, all that has been happening. Scholarships have happened through the ITech route as well. So it's a vibrant partnership that India and Brazil share through the decades, and which has only been growing very massively in recent years.
Absolutely, particularly since a strategic partnership was formed between the two sides in 2006, and particularly in the last decade, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been frequently visiting Brazil since 2014. This is the fourth visit, and of course the first state visit by an Indian Prime Minister.
The 2+2 dialogue is not mentioned in this particular graphic, but that is also a very significant part of the engagement that India and Brazil have. It's just begun last year, but it tells us how the strategic partnership has been evolving to another level altogether.
So India and Brazil share robust and dynamic trade relations. Let's have a look at some of the key areas of trade ties.
2024-25 bilateral trade reached $2.2 billion with Indian exports to Brazil at 6.77 billion USD and imports from Brazil at 5.43 billion USD. So India has a slight trade advantage there. Key Indian exports to Brazil include processed petroleum products, that's diesel, agrochemicals, including pesticides and fungicides, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, engineering products, textured filament yarn, and unwrought aluminum. While key Brazilian exports to India include crude oil, soybean oil, non-monetary gold, raw sugar, cotton, gums, wood, turpentine oil, chemicals, that's carboxylic acid, and iron ore, as well as concentrates.
The Indian investments in Brazil are estimated to exceed $6 billion, whereas Brazilian investments in India are around $1 billion. So Indian investments in Brazil exceed the Brazilian investments in India
by 6 times.
There is a discussion between ICAR and Embrapa of Brazil for concluding an agreement on agricultural research. Besides that, let's keep in mind that while the two countries are superpowers in their own right for agriculture and agriculture export, we are not competing with each other. Right. So our trade basket, export basket is different from export basket of Brazil. So in that way, there is also a complementarity because Brazil has certain produces which we need, and there are certain producers of India which they need.
So what you saw just now is just a small part of the exclusive conversation that DD India has had with India's ambassador to Brazil, Dinesh Bhatia, on New Delhi's key priorities and the state of India-Brazil relations. We have more. Listen in.
As we continue our special coverage of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's five-nation visit, we are joined in by Ambassador Dinesh Bhatia, who is the Ambassador of India to Brazil. Thank you so much, sir, for talking to DD India. How do you think, where is the trajectory of the relationship between both the leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Lula, considering this is Prime Minister Modi's fourth visit this time?
Well, between India and Brazil, and as a matter of fact, Brazil was the first country in Latin America where we opened our embassy in 1948. Brazil and India have always been close countries. They have been part of Global South. And since 2006, our bilateral relations were elevated to strategic partnership.
As you said, this is going to be a very important, much awaited bilateral that is going to happen. But having said that, both countries are agriculture powerhouses. As you said, there's going to be a cooperation. What kind of cooperation can we look forward to in terms of both the countries coming together? Food security, much more sustainable farming practices, much more.
Yes, as I said, there is a discussion between ICAR and Embrapa of Brazil for concluding an agreement on agricultural research. Besides that, let's keep in mind that while the two countries are superpowers in their own right for agriculture and agriculture export, we are not competing with each other. So our trade basket, export basket is different from export basket of Brazil. So in that way, there is also a complementarity because Brazil has certain produces which we need, and there are certain produces of India which they need, of course. And that is being discussed.
One last question. Biofuels, one of the important sectors, mining, one of the important sectors, and as you also said, defense cooperation. Can you elaborate a little more on these three ripe sectors of cooperation?
Mining is very important. Brazil has abundance of critical minerals and rare earth minerals, and where India is looking for partnerships, and we are going to further discuss this during this visit. This is one sector where I think the potential is humongous, and we need to explore all of that. Oil and gas is a sector where we already have investments in Brazil, and we can also use Brazil's expertise in offshore oil and gas for doing something in India. Then you coming to defense cooperation, there is a discussion, and our public and private sector companies are talking about collaborations at the manufacturing level, at the export and import level. A lot of discussion is going on.
So here, as global attention shifts to Brazil with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the BRICS summit, as well as for this landmark bilateral that is going to happen between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Lula, we'll bring to you all the important updates, insights and exclusives from Brazil only for DD India. With camera person Jai Shankar and Piyush, this is Meghna Dev for DD India from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
You're expecting engagements to begin soon in Brasilia. We'll get you up to speed with things as they play out. Also, India's strategic partnership with Brazil has continued to intensify with a high number of high-level engagements, and defense ties have also deepened.
Yes, a defense cooperation agreement was signed in 2003 and ratified in 2006. It established a Joint Defense Committee, or the JDC. 7 JDC or Joint Defense Committee meetings have been held so far. High-level defense exchanges and visits have taken place, with 14 major exchanges taking place in the last 2 years itself. Now, this also includes visits by Indian Air Force Chief to Brazil and Brazilian Army, Navy and Air Force Chiefs to India. Defense cooperation between two nations also includes defense training. Since 2007, 134 defense personnel, 70 from India, 64 from Brazil, have been trained through short and long-term courses, joint military exercises and sailing regattas. Moreover, 2+2 political military dialogue has also been initiated in 2004. Like I mentioned earlier, strategic dialogue mechanism was established in 2006 for discussions on regional and global issues.
Well, a story that spans continents and cultures, a royal gift that changed the course of dairy farming across the country, and how?
Well, DD India's Meghna Dev traces the legacy of Krishna, the bull that bridged the two nations across continents and oceans, that is India and Brazil.
Initiative connects Bhavnagar in Gujarat to the distant land of Brazil. The Gir bull named Krishna was given to Brazil by the then Maharaja of Bhavnagar as a gift, which sowed seeds of white revolution, of dairy revolution in Latin America. What began as a royal gift in 1960 has now blossomed into a global partnership. In the land of Bhavnagar, Gujarat, a bull named Krishna embarked on a journey beyond borders 65 years ago. Gifted to Brazil in 1960 by the Maharaja of Bhavnagar to Celson Garcia Cid, a cattle baron, this bull was not just an animal but a symbol of India's cultural ethos. The bull belonging to the Gir breed is known for its resilience and spiritual significance, especially in the Vaishnavite tradition where cows are considered companions of Lord Krishna.
India gifted Gir and Cancrege, two breeds of cows, to Brazil, and since then Brazil has done tremendous development, tremendous scientific development to crossbreed and better these cows to produce more milk, and that is how we are talking about white revolution in Brazil.
It was the Maharaja of Bhavnagar, Maharaja Krishna Kumar Singh Ji Gohil, who was very kind to gift the Gir cattle, precisely a Gir bull, to the Brazilian gentleman we very fondly remember as Celso Garcia Cid. And it is this relation that has, helped us maintain a very, very good relationship with the people of Brazil till today. One gift from Bhavnagar has helped Brazil in a tremendous way in terms of the income that they've made from the dairy and how well they've utilized it.
Brazil has been a consistent admirer of Indian indigenous cattle breeds. Over the years, the country has developed one of the largest Gir cattle populations outside India, originally imported from Gujarat. These cows now play a key role in Brazil's dairy industry.
My grandfather bought some cows from Maharaja and very good bulls too. And he brought Krishna to Brazil, but unfortunately Krishna died in 1961. But he left a very good son called Krishna Sakina. Now we have thousands of descendants of Krishna Sakina. We thank India for this magnificent gift.
From Bhavnagar to Brazil, this was the journey of a bull named Krishna. The gesture was more than diplomacy. It's a living emblem of India's philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. Meghna Dev's report for DD India.
And that's just one big bull reason to be bullish about the India-Brazil story.
Absolutely. Well, joining us now is Professor Arvind Kumar. He's a professor with School of International Studies, JNU, and also Ambassador Manju Seth, former senior diplomat, former Indian ambassador, is joining us. Such a pleasure to have the two of you here on this special broadcast. So, borrowing a word that Gautam used about how and why we should be bullish as far as India-Brazil ties are concerned. What are your expectations, Ambassador, considering that we've shown how ties have been resilient because of the resilient Krishna bull that India had exported and how that is celebrated to this date in Brazil, to how the ties have now developed to a strategic partnership in 2006 and how there's so much of hectic diplomacy between both the sides and so much of strategic trust now between India and Brazil?
Absolutely. The relationship goes back historically to many, many decades ago, and it was the first country Brazil was the first country to establish diplomatic ties with India. So I think amongst the first. So it is something which is very, very special. This relationship is very special and is very rightly mentioned. Bull, I think the bull diplomacy and the cattle which went from India, I think has also played a very important role in keeping that legacy alive of those special relationships that has existed for so many decades. And today we see that when the cows and the cattle that they have, which they've increased their milk production, etc., they still refer to as a Nellore variety, so with an Indian variety. So I think this relationship is very, very special, and both being democratic countries, I think in between there was some during
the Operation Vijay that happened in the 1960s, yes.
Slight dip in relations, but after that, I think after the 90s, again, we got back on track. And it's so multifaceted, covering every possible area of cooperation, from defense, security, and agriculture, people-to-people ties, pharmaceuticals, you name it, and it's there. Almost every sector is covered, and we have strategic partnership, and that also covers many aspects. Defense, and security, and special, consultations with each other. And we have seen that this happened during the G20 also. We had a special, when the G20 presidency was handed over by India to Brazil, again, there was a very close interaction and cooperative kind of approach. And Prime Minister's bilateral visit to Brazil, is going to reiterate, as very rightly said, it's in 6 decades, 57 years, 60 years almost since there's been a bilateral visit. So I think this is a very positive step because it's a very important country. Brazil has a lot of opportunities for India and Indian companies, including in defense. They manufacture very good aircraft. And the Embraer aircraft has been, they've been buying it, and there are a number of them in India. So I think in every aspect, if you look, there is opportunity and there's mutual benefit. Two-way investments have also gone up. Many Indian companies have invested in Brazil. Many Brazilian companies have invested in India. Joint ventures are being spoken about in the defense sector and other sectors. I think the immense possibilities are there, and we are, both countries are moving quickly to capitalize on these and to make it a win-win situation for both sides.
Right. Now, I was in Rio last year to cover the G20 summit on behalf of DD India, Professor Arun Kumar, and I remember somewhere in my phone that picture is also there of a mango tree which was laden with green mangoes. Now, mangoes are also something that connect India and Brazil. They went from India to Brazil while cashews came to India.
We sent coconut also, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, coconut as well.
Coconut and mangoes in exchange for cashew nuts.
I brought that up because I wanted to ask you in terms of what are the low-hanging fruits here. We heard the former ambassador mention a lot of areas where India and Brazil have already built up ties. More can be done in those areas. But what are the low-hanging fruits that we can really look to exploit at this point of time?
Yeah, I think the way now things have unfolded between India and Brazil, and India and Brazil have come a long way, as was pointed out. I think a lot of potential which still exists to be exploited by both the countries. And I see that now Agriculture Research Cooperation Agreement, which has been signed, perhaps will boost both India and Brazil. Obviously, they can explore further in terms of not only improving the tie, but also helping both the economy to grow. So I think that agreement, perhaps among all the 4 agreements, is going to be very predominant, because India also is having a very good base for itself in agricultural research, and Brazil also is having the same base. So I think both can really work together in terms of enhancing not only the product, but also see that how much they could use the potential of each other in a very positive manner.
Right, Ambassador, taking that point forward, right. These are visuals coming in of the ceremonial welcome being accorded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was on a state visit to Brazil in Brazil's capital, Brasilia. These are visuals coming in from outside the Alvorada Palace.
These are live images that we're getting you of a grand ceremonial reception that Prime Minister Modi is about to get. You can see his vehicle there, being led by the ceremonial guards on horseback, and this is going to be a fairly elaborate ceremony, what I really understand, as this is a state visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Brazil and the Brazilian capital Brasilia after almost 6 decades. If I could ask you about this, Ambassador Manju Seth, this just underscores the kind of significance that is being attached to this particular state visit by Brazil and President Lula da Silva.
Absolutely. You can see the pomp and splendor literally of the welcome being given at the airport. Also, it's a very colorful and energetic welcome. And we see now when he's going to the palace and our Prime Minister is going to the palace, it's again a lot of pomp, and it's really looking very, very beautiful. And I think it is again a very special gesture and points to the importance of this visit for both sides, of course, but also for the Brazilians. And I think the fact that we have many areas where kind of decisions will be taken and during this visit, and to enhance the bilateral trade, in every aspect, as I mentioned earlier also there, renewable energy, biofuels. I mean, it's immense. The sheer number of areas where we can enhance this partnership. Of course, its potential is very rightly mentioned by Professor. It is something which we have to meet, both sides have to meet, and I think this visit will send a clear signal to companies on both sides, to the government on both sides, to give full focus.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been accorded a grand ceremonial welcome in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, where he has come on a state visit. The first state visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 6 decades, and he's accompanied by the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and the First Lady of Brazil.
You can see the two national flags there. The two national anthems were also played out. A very cheerful national anthem of Brazil and India's own Jana Gan Man played out with the leaders standing at attention to witness the proceedings. And you can see how elaborate this entire ceremonial reception is. It's a grand ceremonial reception that the PM's been given in the Brazilian capital, Brasilia. Professor Arvind Kumar, seeing all these men in uniform, their splendid uniforms, I'm only reminded of the fact that India and Brazil are strategic partners. They have a defense partnership going, a 2+2 dialogue, fairly large armies for both the countries. India is the second largest in the world, and then Brazil too, not too far behind, I think the 11th largest, and a lot of scope for cooperation there, which perhaps will be explored today.
I think yes, I think very correct. I think both India and Brazil obviously will have to further intensify their defense cooperation. I think both are strategic partners. The way things have been planned, I think whatever agreements are going to be signed, this would further boost the strategic partnership.
And you think that Operation Sindoor has been a big pointer in terms of how things could really be taken forward where defense cooperation is concerned?
Because counter-terrorism cooperation also is going to be a part of the discussion. So I think that is something which is very important, because what happens in counter-terrorism cooperation, that nations coming to share the knowledge.
Now, the leaders of the two countries, India and Brazil, are walking into the Palacio da Alvorada, which is the official residence of the President of Brazil, after a grand ceremonial welcome accorded to the visiting dignitary, India's Prime Minister. And the two sides now headed for bilateral talks. There is a very strong tradition of cultural ties between India and Brazil. Indian philosophy, spirituality and religion
Quem veio comigo fica vai comigo.
ये सीधी तस्वीर है बिल्कुल.
So that was a grand welcome, a grand reception accorded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi visiting now Brasilia as part of the bilateral segment of his visit. He's there on a state visit, the first, as we've been saying, by an Indian Prime Minister in 6 decades. And what a reception, a very warm and colourful one, a pretty grand one as well.
Multiple facets to it. It was, of course, grand and traditional. There was military pomp. And we saw the national anthems also being performed by the bands, the military bands there. And then that special element too thrown in with that Ram Bhajan. What do you make of that, Professor Arvind Kumar?
Really have been following India's rich cultural heritage. I think that is something which I think they have accepted it very well. And this is the way I think they really have come up in terms of understanding India. I think that is a very good sign for developing a very good bilateral between India and Brazil.
Ambassador, your thoughts on the kind of reception that the Prime Minister got and how the traditional Indian elements, Indian classical music a lot in terms of the cultural connect that we see between India and Brazil was showcased today.
Because large numbers of Brazilians are practicing dance, the Indian dance, music, and even the Vedanta philosophy and yoga. I think Indian culture has a special resonance, I think, in Brazil, because there are many similarities also. And the fact that the special, showcase was done for the Prime Minister to welcome him with the little bhajan, and before at arrival yesterday at the airport again, it was all a very good combination of Brazilian and Indian culture, and I think it is sending a special message, reiterating that yes, we also have a cultural connect, we also have a people-to-people connect. Besides all the strategic and defense partnership and security partnerships, we have a very close connect at the cultural level as well.
Yes, certainly, and even the spiritual level with the bhajan that was about Lord Ram being performed right there in the middle, towards the end, in fact, rather, of the grand ceremonial reception. Professor Arvind Kumar again just shows how India's spiritualism is also a huge connect with Brazil. The Brazilian people themselves are extremely spiritual. They have Christ the Redeemer above Tokyo, looking over the city as its protector too.
Yes, of course. I think that is a very important element right now. The spread of spiritualism, India's spiritualism elsewhere in the world in general, and I see Brazil in particular, I think it speaks volume about India and India's contribution. I think that is something we need to acknowledge and obviously need to also take pride in.
Absolutely. Taking that point forward with you, Ambassador, like we've been talking about how not just Indian bulls, Indian products really sailed from India to Brazil, and there was, of course, a common colonial connect between both Brazil as well as Goa, as far as Portugal is concerned. So, if you could, throw some light on how cultures have flowed besides goods and services from India to Brazil and back into India.
Absolutely, there's been a flow, as we can see. It's evident in what we see today, and yesterday for the welcome given to the Prime Minister. And yes, it has continued to build. The cultural flow from India, from Brazil also. There is some influence, especially in Goa. We see there's a lot of cuisine and dresses and general customs. A lot of it is prevalent in Goa, and in India also. I think there's a connect because of the kind of music, the samba music, and other which is very, very popular in India. And Indian culture seems to be a little more has affected or has more influenced. Let me put it that way. Influenced in Brazil. And we can see it, it's not only Indian origin people, but it's also locals who are very much into the spiritual, cultural, activities. And they are, because I think also if you look at what is happening around the world, so much of, strife and so much of tension for everybody. And there are, all kinds of course, Brazil is a little far away from in the Middle East and Ukraine, etc. But still, people are affected because, the fact that Indian spirituality, Indian culture has this effect, has positive effect on their overall well-being, on their overall mental well-being, including through yoga, through spiritual practices. I think that has been a major factor for the spread and popularity of Indian culture across the world, and again, particularly in Brazil, I believe.
Yes, and as far as India is concerned, Brazil is seen as, of course, a large country, huge country, Amazon forests there, and it is also associated with the carnival in Rio. But what more, there are so many other elements that really connect India and Brazil, and that is something that has a lot of room for exploring as well, isn't there, Professor Arvind Kumar?
Right. I think one area which still requires more emphasis by India in terms of getting tangibles is their science and technology base. I think that is something which India has not discovered much. Their technological base is quite huge. especially in terms of their air-based assets, Embraer and all. And that is something which one can really see that how that could aid to India's requirement, especially strengthening India's Make in India. That is one part. Second part, obviously that comes as a part of India's strategic partnership with Brazil as well as India's defense cooperation with Brazil. But tangibles still have not been witnessed. Intangibles remain intangibles. So that has to get culminated. And I think India's outreach, especially in the context of its connect with Brazil, that has improved remarkably and obviously is moving ahead in every area. But how best, in fact, both India and Brazil can understand each other's requirement. Now I see that whatever they are going to discuss today as a part of the bilaterals, I think would certainly be of greater help to both the countries. I think I see a lot of things are on the agenda. One such thing is on renewable energy cooperation. I think that is something which is very important because that is directly linked with the environmental security and climate change. Second, I see that how they are going to commit to enhance their bilaterals, especially in the context of intelligence information sharing, which I made this point earlier. And the third, which again is very critical, especially in the context of enhancing both the food security part and also improving upon their bilateral relationship, is in the area of agriculture. So agriculture research cooperation again is going to be very significant. So I think there are far too many areas where the tangibles obviously have to be seen. Otherwise, many of these things again would remain optics. I think that is something which you have to understand.
Yeah, Ambassador, coming to you, tell us about whether there is now growing awareness about India in Brazil, because I'm aware that there is a popular Brazilian television serial. It's called The Parts of India. That's quite popular in India, in Brazil. And also there was a new special that was aired in 2019. It's called Journey of Life, Ganges River. It was aired by Brazil's leading media group. It's called Globo Television, and it focuses on places that have an important role in the development of Indian civilization. So if there were no interest or less interest in Brazil about India and its civilization, such programs would not have become a huge hit. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to increase awareness through such programs, and I think the media plays a very important role, including through television serials and other, films and documentaries, etc. It is an important way of focusing and sort of letting people know. Because once there is awareness, I think already there is, I believe, but it's not across the country. Because a large number of the Indian origin people are not, they're not across the country. They're mainly in I think, Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro and others. So they're not across the country. So if it was, they were living across the country. Pardon?
No, please go ahead.
Yeah. So if they were spread across the country, then there would be more awareness. In whichever country we see that wherever there's a large Indian origin population, there is a lot of positivity and awareness and knowledge about India. But where there are less people, it takes a little time. But such airing of such movies and documentaries and serials definitely helps to create awareness and more goodwill, I think, because eventually
Ambassador, just hold your thoughts. Well, introduction of delegates happening in Brasilia after the ceremonial welcome outside the Alvarado Palace with military honors. Now the introduction of Brazilian delegates taking place. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting and greeting Brazilian delegates before the start of the delegation level talks and the restricted talks between the two sides.
Yes, and you can see how long the introductions are lasting because of the large number of delegates. It indicates the kind of areas that India and Brazil are looking to cooperate on, to expand on what already exists, and perhaps even strike new ground as well, if that is feasible this time around. We're being told that that is going to happen. There are MOUs that have been agreed, will be exchanged, as many as 4 of them, and Professor Arvind Kumar was talking about them just a while back. But in terms of what India and Brazil have worked upon so far and what is in the pipeline, do you feel, Ambassador, that there is a lot of scope to do more as long as the economies of both the countries keep flourishing the way they have. India, of course, the largest, the fastest growing large economy right now. Brazil not really keeping pace with the kind of growth that India has witnessed in recent years, but it has a lot of potential to just take it forward very quickly and perhaps catch up.
Not be so large, Brazil's GDP, but otherwise per capita GDP is quite high, much ahead of India. So I think that is, and the fact that it's like one of the top emerging countries as well, economies. So yes, the GDP growth hasn't been as robust as it should be or as it was, but Brazil already has quite a lot of technological and innovation advantages. And it has, as we mentioned earlier, it manufactures the embraer. But after Operation Sindoor, you had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of interest in India's BrahMos missiles, in the airborne systems and the air defense systems, and drones, etc. So I think there will be a lot of emphasis on new and emerging technologies, including, I think, AI, and how to sort of leverage these and utilize them for further innovation, further develop R&D, and there has been talk of joint development and co-development of joint R&D in many sectors and emerging technologies as well. So I think that is another area where there could be some focus, and we could see something in that as well.
Yes, Professor Arun Kumar, India certainly has interest in Brazil's civil aviation industry. Embraer has an Indian subsidiary here as well, and a partnership is blossoming with, I believe, the Mahindra Group too. But perhaps Brazil this time around could have, because India doesn't really have much of a civil aviation industry, but it does have, other kind of aircraft which are of military use.
Yes, I think, see, now the time has come for India to leverage its strength, especially in strategic core areas, because that is something which is going to be very vital. And now I see that one such thing which India and Brazil have been talking about is in the outer space sector. And that is something which could certainly help both the countries in terms of not only building confidence, but also promoting the bilateral interest. So there are areas which again requires, especially from both sides, which is required from both sides, that how best they can work and strengthen their larger defense cooperation. Defense cooperation is the key right now, and I see that there is a lot of potential which exists, and if that gets completely harnessed by both the countries, there is nothing like it in terms of promoting the bilateral cooperation.
Yes, would you say there is then a lot of potential as far as defense cooperation is concerned, because in terms of joint production, in terms of import and exports, can we expect a lot to happen? Of late, there have been far too many visits at the highest level of the three services from both sides, from Brazil to India and India to Brazil. So do you think that there is much more that can happen now going forward in terms of purchase of even those systems that India had displayed during Operation Sindoor, like BrahMos and Akash air defense system?
I think that is what is required right now on part of India, that how best India could again leverage its strategic core competency and promote its interest by not only giving BrahMos to Brazil, but also seeing that how best Brazil could help India and strengthen India's Make in India, because India basically is certainly in search for co-production in many of these aerospace sector, and Brazilian strength basically lies in aerospace sector in the current context. Their air power capabilities, that also has to get harnessed by India. And India's air power capabilities largely focuses on not only the light combat aircraft, that Tejas or BrahMos, the cruise missile, but also, in fact, it goes much deeper into developing a lot of these drones. I think drones, the variety of drones are really being constructed by India now. And how
so do you think that in the context of drones particularly, technology sharing could take place?
I think so. That is what is needed right now. I think that is something which obviously is going to help both the countries in building confidence. So I think this is the right time for both India and Brazil to, in fact, see that how the intangibles get culminated in intangibles. I think intangibles should not remain intangibles.
So a lot possible where the air domain is concerned. Ambassador. But what about other arms or wings of the military forces? I believe there's a tremendous scope for cooperation, collaboration in the field of in the maritime field as well, and apart from that, even as far as the ground forces are concerned.
Absolutely, in the maritime field, there's talk of the maintenance of the Scorpion submarine, which Brazil has, and also in co-developing platforms, marine platforms. There is talk, and that in Mazagon, the Mazagon shipyard has been also will be in talks, and they're already looking at seeing how co-development of these things can take place. And they could think of buying. Brazil could think of buying or placing orders, and also for the army. I think a lot of artillery, there's talk of artillery and a lot of other equipment that India has strengths in, and where I think even Brazil has some strengths. So to share and to co-develop, I think in both countries are not so reticent as some other bigger countries in sharing technology. We have seen that in many cases, sometimes full technology is not shared, but as far as I believe that both Brazil and India will be more open to sharing technology and to transfer of technology and to co-develop and produce state-of-the-art equipment, which is what is required in today's world, including in the cyber security domain, including in, as I mentioned earlier, also AI. These are all things which are required, to maintain an edge, a technological edge, is important, and I think both countries will be able to do that by working together and co-developing these systems and artillery, ammunition, maritime security, aspects, everything in the defense field.
Yes, for the benefit of you viewers, Ambassador, if you could explain to us where both Brazil and India are coming from when it comes to defense cooperation. Is Brazil looking at more strategic alliances, and is India really topping that list, so to say, as it tries to reinvent its defense strategy for the modern times? And is India looking at co-production with Brazil besides other defense exchanges so that it could reach out to the larger region of Latin America?
Yes, absolutely. That was looking at co-development of equipment of army, armed arms and ammunition, etc., and even the defense systems. So I think they are looking for that, and it will be a very win-win situation for both to be able to export or manufacture and for the entire Latin American region and other regions as well. And there are strengths in Brazil in the manufacturing sector, in the defense sector, whereas there are many strengths in the Indian defense sector. So both of them together, I think, can really work together to also service our country market.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, and we have also heard about the fact that there will be an MOU or some sort of a pact where information sharing is concerned, sharing of confidential information of strategic significance. Professor Arvind Kumar, just tell us, what sort of exchange could there be in terms of, because geopolitically, India and Brazil are seen to be, of course, partners where BRICS is concerned. They're both emerging economies, but they're in very different regions with very different strategic and security environments.
I think I also saw that how that has become a part of the agreement. But do you know, I think in counterterrorism cooperation, that really is covered very well. Because in counterterrorism cooperation, what happens? Nations commit to share intelligence information. And that is by and large confidential. So I don't know in what ways this is going to be a separate agenda to produce the confidential information by both the parties. There is going to be commitment made. This should be featuring largely under that counterterrorism cooperation, and that should really have fulfill the requirements of both the countries.
No, but if you look if you look really at the big picture there, Ambassador, doesn't it show that there is deep strategic trust? Both sides echo each other when it comes to counterterrorism cooperation, when it comes to saying that not just those who carry out terrorist attacks should be punished, but also those who give them safe havens or who finance terror acts. They coordinate not just on a bilateral level, they coordinate on a multilateral level, they coordinate even in the FATF. So do you think that if there were to be a separate pact, say, on sharing confidential information, or even if it were under the counterterrorism framework, it's just a matter of semantics, but doesn't it show that there is deep strategic trust between the two sides? There is a 2+2 strategic dialogue.
As far as I understand, there are going to be two different pacts. One about counterterrorism, the other about sharing confidential information. Because again, confidential information would go beyond terrorism as well. Like I said, the security, the strategic environment of both these countries are different. They have core competences in their own geographical zones, their spheres of influence. So sharing information there could be of tremendous use to both the countries.
Like transnational crimes, for instance.
Yes, absolutely. I think transnational crimes would be a major focus of this, and also the fact that a lot of criminals are, of course, we know that Brazil has this problem of mafia and criminal activity. A lot of their army or army sort of attention is more towards countering criminal and transnational crimes as compared to they don't have any enemies at the moment in the region. So I think the focus is in Brazil. The focus is more on countering this, and I think yes, transnational crime, and many from India people do go and find refuge in many other countries, and and especially if they're connected with the mafia and other criminal gangs. Including terrorist supporters, etc. So I think it will be a very important agreement where confidential information, which is of vital interest to each other in combating not only terrorism but other transnational crimes, I think it will be a very positive step and is needed, very needed.
Okay, let's come to trade now. Professor Kumar, what are the possibilities there, considering that as far as Brazil is concerned, it is India's largest trade partner in the Latin American region, and the balance of trade, of course, is in India's favor at this point in time, but we are also looking at a bilateral trade target of $20 billion going forward.
And this day and age where you have tariff threats being thrown about everywhere, and of course this is a age where people are different countries are looking to strike bilateral trade deals, these free trade agreements or limited trade agreements, what have you. What is the scope for that happening between India and Brazil?
Though the volume of trade has improved remarkably, it has now touched to, I think, $12.2 billion. And as it was pointed out, that how that is in India's favor, because India is exporting more and importing less. And that is something which is good for Indian economy. But the target set for touching to $20 billion requires a lot of bilateral effort, especially in the context of having a huge investment done. So trade and investment will remain a part of the priority by both the countries, and how best they could really move ahead, especially in improving this figure. And obviously that could create win-win situation for both India and Brazil. Perhaps is going to be also discussed. That how the things could really be taking a shape.
I'm glad you mentioned investment as well. Ambassador, if I could ask you about that, India has till now cumulatively invested $6 billion. That does not mean the government itself, but it means Indian companies too. And from Brazil, that quantum is significantly lower, $1 billion. Why is that the case, and what can be done about it?
Probably because much of the investment here is, for in companies which are acting as, I think, getting things from for instance, the mining investments, making it more like an investment into Brazil. They are more meant for that, and not so much coming into India. But yes, I think that will change now, and should change as
to what extent do you think Embraer can fix it?
And Embraer can fix it too. Yes, why not? And also because the ease of business and setting up businesses in India has improved, and because that used to be a little bit of a barrier for companies to come and invest. For some companies, I think some countries or some companies find it a little more difficult, but I think most companies who are here have been able to find their way about it, but I think now Brazilian companies should also be able to do so after the. And I think, yes, as you very rightly mentioned, defense companies and other, co-development of in other sectors, including in agriculture and agricultural products. I think that will be another area where we can work together.
But I think Embraer has taken the right route, because normally it paves the way a lot better for a foreign enterprise to come into the country when they have a JV, Indian JV partner as well. So that is happening in that case, Embraer and Mahindra. But there are many other fields where the capabilities that Brazil has, particularly in its private sector, Professor Arvind Kumar, that could come in handy when it comes to increasing the quantum of investments from Brazil to India.
And that is what is expected, that how much there could be more private industry coming to India, because India is certainly looking for investment from elsewhere in the world. And any investment done in India would certainly help India. As I said, that how India will strengthen its Make in India would very much depend upon the investment from elsewhere in the world. And unless and until there is a private investment coming from Brazil, especially in terms of promoting the bilateral interest, I don't think that there is going to be any change in terms of their overall progress in trade and investment.
Yes, also Professor Kumar, if you could explain to us, possibly going forward, what could be the scope of expansion of the trade between India and the Mercosur region? There is already a preferential trade agreement that exists between the two, and currently Brazil is the chair since the 1st of this month of Mercosur. So under the chairship of Mercosur, since there are 3 to 4 countries under this arrangement, do you think that that can also be explored and Brazil can play an enabling role there?
I think so. I think Mercosur really has been a very tested, agreement, and that has really helped all the members of Mercosur. And Brazil being going to be the chair, and how that could really be seen as a part of a priority by India. But whether India is going to really have FTA with Brazil or not, that is something which would depend very much on the bilateral interests of both the countries. And that will take its own course. But at the same time, Mercosur, I think, has really been tested very well. It's a very old setting, and that bloc basically has been yielding to good dividends. Brazil also has been benefiting from Mercosur. That is something which I think India has to understand and see that how India and Brazil can move ahead in terms of having certain mechanism which could certainly give some sort of FTA understanding. But FTA is a long drawn process. It's not that easy. In fact, as you know, that India's negotiating style, especially on FTA, is different, because India obviously has a different way to look into, especially in the context of trade and investment. So still India is not in a position right now to move ahead and have a FTA with Brazil.
Right. And we've seen, Ambassador, we've seen Prime Minister Modi also visiting Argentina as part of his multiple 5-nation tour this time around. And that is again an area which is, of course, south of Brazil, a very large country in itself. And we're looking to cooperate in varying fields with Argentina as well, particularly critical minerals. Do you feel that either of these two nations can be a springboard for India to, increase its presence, its footprint in all of Latin America, even the Caribbean? We saw the Prime Minister visiting the Caribbean as well this time around.
These countries, with Argentina, we've had pretty stable relationships, but yet it's not a very robust relationship in the sense, not huge, numbers are not so big. But yes, and Argentina is part of the Mercosur. So if this FTA agreement that is being talked about, there is already an FTA, but to strengthen it further with Brazil in the chair, there is scope for reaching a kind of agreement to further boost the two-way trade under the FTA, under the Mercosur-India FTA. And I think Argentina, of course, is an important country, and and as you very rightly said, for minerals and for lithium and for other many important items. I think and entire Latin America is important, but it's because it's been, I think, far away. We've all, not been so. We are engaged, but not as much as we should be. Now the other renewable energy and other we talked about climate change, climate financing. I think we can all work together in all of these and see how renewable energy can be enhanced. And India has strengths in that. And also, it's not only about trade, but it's also about working together and investing in each other's countries to make the bilateral relationship strong and mutually beneficial.
Yes.
Right. On that note, we
Yes.
thank you, Ambassador, for taking out time for us. Understand you are hard pressed for time, but Professor Kumar will continue to be with us. And let's, Gautam, now bring our viewers up to speed with all the developments that have played out so far.
Yes, well, what we've seen just a short while back is Prime Minister Narendra Modi being accorded a ceremonial welcome, a grand ceremonial welcome as it's been described at Brazil's presidential palace, the Alvorada Palace. Now, for the state visit to Brazil, Prime Minister is in Brasilia, where he will also hold bilateral discussions with President Lula da Silva on broadening of the strategic partnership between the two countries.
So inside the presidential palace in Brasilia, Brazilian President Lula introduced his delegation to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while Prime Minister Modi introduced his visiting delegation too.
And earlier, after concluding a productive and successful visit in Rio with the BRICS summit, now we're seeing these images which were part of the grand ceremonial reception itself, where bhajan dedicated to Lord Ram was also performed before the two leaders moved into Alvorada Palace.
A spiritual rendition performed in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as part of the warm welcome accorded to the Prime Minister just outside the Alvorada Presidential Palace. That was President of Brazil introducing his delegation to Prime Minister Narendra Modi inside the Alvorada Palace, which is effectively the official residence of the President of Brazil.
This is, remember, a state visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Brazil after almost 6 decades. A lot of ground to cover, so that is also being conveyed by the number of delegates that have been introduced by the leaders to each other, really, in terms of, you can see the number of hands that have been shaken by both the leaders. And this was the standout element, one of the standout elements rather of the grand ceremonial reception, this bhajan that was performed before both the leaders.
भैया मैं दूरदर्शन पे बैठा हूँ, अभी मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता।
Soulful rendition of Ram Bhajan in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as part of the welcome accorded to him as a dignitary who has come there on a state visit to Brazil. Well, joining us now for perspective is Professor Gulshan Sachdeva. He is with the School of International Studies. Professor Sachdeva, the red carpet being rolled out for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, befitting, would you say, as a state visit by an Indian Prime Minister comes after 6 decades?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is a very, very important visit by Prime Minister. I mean, I was just listening to your conversation just few minutes before. I mean, we know all the details of bilateral relations, but as your title, of this program shows that Global South partners, and in the last couple of years, we have seen, the whole discussion and narrative within Indian foreign policy and even the global discourse on foreign policy about the emergence of Global South, and within Global South, the rise of India. And if India has to really lead Global South or be a very, very important voice within Global South, and I think Brazil is one of the main partners India really have to work with. Of course, we have been working with them for decades. I mean, more than 20 years. We have strategic partnership, and then all solid institutional mechanism with all kind of meetings. But we really have to work very hard now in this region, politically, strategically, and also economically. I mean, this region is very important. And Brazil within Latin America is one of the largest economy, a very, very important country. And if Global South has to rise, then India has to work within Latin America and particularly with Brazil, because its Global South narrative is not just only about economics. It's not only about that these economies have become bigger. But there is also a solid intellectual challenge, which a Global South has to really assert. And Brazil and whole Latin America is a place which we have seen earlier during non-alignment period, and also during we have seen all this center-periphery debate and everything else. So the Brazil, in fact, is going to play a very, very important role. And for India, the partnership is very important. And most importantly, in the last 10-15 years, now the China has also become very active in this region. So I think the Prime Minister's state visit now to Brazil, and earlier his visit to Argentina, two very, very important countries in this region, it will go a long way really to strengthen our partnership and really shaping the global narratives.
Yes, definitely. And just tells us, Professor Arun Kumar, the kind of partners that India and Brazil are. They are, of course, emerging economies. They are already part of BRICS. They are flag bearers for the Global South as well, having the same democratic values, a similar outlook towards how they should be developing their economies, keeping sustainable development goals in mind. Do you think with all this, keeping that in perspective, there is a way that they can really show to the world how business around the world should be conducted between nations?
Yes, of course. I think India and Brazil have far too many convergences on a number of pertinent important areas, as you have pointed out. And in that context, I think these two countries, if they work together and build a very robust strategic partnership, which they are attempting to, that could perhaps show the way to the rest of the world, that how the nations can really work in a manner that could really create win-win situation. I think this is something which India and Brazil are showing to the world.
Okay. Professor Sachdeva, coming to you, we heard the Prime Minister speak on the session COP30 and environment in the BRICS summit, and renewable energy is also one sector of cooperation on which forward movement is expected, like a pact of some kind between India and Brazil. Do you think that both India and Brazil are leading by example when it comes to climate action and also becoming exemplars for the world?
Well, Brazil anyway is a very, very important player. I mean, the COP30 is going to be there, and Brazil has very ambitious agenda. And of course, I mean, if country like India and Brazil, if they do not move, then we can't really achieve, the goals which have been set by, Paris 2015 or even within the Agenda 2030. So these countries have to work, but again, they have to work not just only within their own countries, which they are doing, what we are doing in India and they are doing in Brazil, but more than $1 trillion of green finance, which is really required, for which, in fact, there has to be solid voice coming from the global south, and I think the Brazil will lead the way there, when they are going to have COP30 in their country, and for which, they have to really, tell the world and assert that yes, the technologies, the finance, which is really required for this, have to come from many other countries from the north, and countries from the south, and India and Brazil, very important countries within the global south, are working on this, and they're also working with other partners in the global south. So this is one area, because energy, of course, is a very important area in which we have been working with Brazil, both in the traditional fossil fuel, because our companies, ONGC Videsh particularly, they have invested, I think, close to 3 billion in Brazil. So that's one area which, and 15-16% of our energy comes from Latin America. So this is one area which we have to work both, and all these countries, both Argentina and Brazil, they also have ambitious plans of renewables and hydrogen, green hydrogen, etc. So there are plenty of areas in which I think both these countries can work together.
Yes.
And,
biofuels as well. But as far as leading the way in the cause of the environment, we will have the COP30 in Brazil in Belém a little down the line this year itself, Professor Arvind Kumar. And India's also in the pipeline as far as hosting a COP is concerned a few years down the line from now. But do you think that this is an area where since in COP30 itself, as Donald Trump has walked America out of the Paris Agreement, there will be a lot of gap to fill, and perhaps India and Brazil are the ones that could show to the world what can be done, even when certain, the biggest polluter in the world is being irresponsible. Biggest
Now,
historical and current
Yes.
polluter in the world, really.
Right. They have been converging, especially in the context of reducing the dependency on the use of the fossil fuel. And almost I see that the agenda for COP30 has been set now. It is going to happen in November, but the agenda has been set that how best they could really pursue a path which could really make the overall use of the fossil fuel less, especially in the context of, in fact, the energy security constituent. And in that context, I think India and Brazil have become the torch bearer. The other thing which I see right now here is that both the countries also basically are showing to the world that it is not the developed countries which are going to find solution to this emerging problem. These are perhaps going to be the developing countries. They really have to be, again, revisit the notion of climate finance, the notion of climate justice, even if, as you know, the US remains the second largest polluter, but they have come out of Paris Agreement, and that shows there no commitment whatsoever in the context of adhering to the stipulations made in the Paris Agreement. And that, again, I want to repeat that how, in fact, national states had committed to reduce the dependency on the use of the fossil fuel less than 60% by 2030. India achieved the target in December 2022. And in that context, I think India has become a torch bearer. The rest of the world really has been keenly watching that how India has done this, and obviously is going to be a very important factor in COP30.
Yes, Professor Sachdeva, would you go to the extent of saying that here in this particular field and department, it's perhaps the BRICS which can do more than even, say, the G7?
I think so. In fact, expanded BRICS basically will have the onus in terms of finding the solution to these many problems. G7, slowly or steadily, is going to lose relevance. And I see that G7 already has become G5 because Italy and the United Kingdom, they have lost their relevance. Whatsoever, they have lost their relevance. So G5 already they have become. And slowly and steadily, we have to understand the larger emerging economies' relevance and obviously the developing countries. And they obviously have to contribute more, because the consumption pattern of G5 has not changed. The consumption pattern of developing countries and emerging economies has really been changing, and they really understand what is climate change, what is environmental security, and that is the way, in fact, they are unfolding their policy and moving ahead in terms of not only addressing to the challenges emanating from their energy security constituents, less dependence on the fossil fuel, more dependence on the renewables. That is what is the slogan now among the emerging economies and developing countries.
Yes, going to Professor Sachdev. Professor, we heard from both Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as from President Lula during the BRICS summit on how commitments have not been kept by the developed world, even in terms of climate finance or transfer of technology. We know that adaptation funding has been the Achilles heel. It's been a weakness because it hasn't really come through. Number of pledges made over the years, over the decades from the developed nations to help the developing world, but not much has come through, if something has. Taking the same argument forward, do you think it is now time to realign priorities and expectations, and while shame the developed world or continue to shame them, it's time to now look inwards and look for solutions, like for instance life that the Prime Minister came up with, or plantation of tree in the name of the mother, or you know, the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi of the minimum carbon footprint, and also come up with more funding and more money and more innovative solutions to deal with the issue.
No, you're absolutely right, because you know, the problem is so huge that it has to be dealt at a different level by everybody. I'm not underestimating what G7 can do. Certain things obviously will be done within G20, and of course many of those, and of course within BRICS. But the implementation part will happen somewhere else. So at those places also, particularly with the UNFCCC and the agreements which have been made and the commitments which have been made, that has to be reminded. And you're also right that the certain consumption pattern, like you mentioned about life, those are the kind of movements which has to happen in the global south, and Prime Minister led that one during G20, and I think many other countries in the world are also looking toward this. But another major issue also which need to be understood, that the energy transition which is taking place, of course every country is talking about, apart from now the US, where of course the situation is very different under President Trump. But every country, look at Europe, look at Latin America, look at Africa, anywhere else, every country is concerned about this, and every organization, regional organization, international organization, and the national plans, I think every country is trying to do whatever they can do depending on their capabilities and their resources. But transitions are very different in every country, in every part of the world. The kind of energy transition which is happening in Europe is very different. The kind of energy transition which has to happen in Brazil or in India itself going to be very different. Because what is happening in the developed world, one of course is, as Professor Arvind Kumar mentioned, that the consumption pattern has not really changed much. But at the same time, what has another thing we see in the developed world, their energy consumption has come down for two reasons. One is the efficiency of energy has increased, and secondly, particularly most of the European and other economy, Japanese economy, the growth rate has been relatively low.
Since and the affordability of energy is also gone down, it's become more expensive.
Yes, I mean that of course is an added factor. So then of course that's also reducing their competitiveness. But since so they are basically now the demand is relatively less, so they are moving more from fossil fuel to renewables. That's what all your targets are. And particularly after Ukraine war, I think like in Europe, the under the Renew plan, so the targets are even closer. They want to achieve many things by 2030, and they're also investing into this. And some of the things they have postponed.
But as far as climate justice and climate finance are concerned, Professor Sachdeva, do you feel that there is a need for resetting the perspective as well, and not to see climate finance as an expense, as a handout, but perhaps as an investment which will give returns many times over than what is put into it?
No, this is what in fact I think everybody has argued, and I think nobody argues against this. But the problem is really providing finance for this. I mean, when all the developed countries, when they agreed to provide certain numbers as a development finance, and they made all these commitments. So that was, of course, is the understanding that it's not that charity they are doing. This is basically if something is happening, it's going to affect everybody. And if developing countries where the production, where into the consumption is going to go up, because large number of people are coming out of poverty, so they will obviously have a minimum consumption of energy and other goods and services. So there the demand is going to go up, and for that, at least now and the consumption pattern which they are able to enjoy at the moment, or they have enjoyed in the past, most developing countries, the emerging economy, the BRICS economies, they'll not be able to enjoy the similar kind of consumption pattern because Earth simply will not be able to afford this. So that's why, in fact, a different kind of movement that we have to reduce consumption. But now, what the point I was making, that in a country like India, we would be making, of course, investments into renewables, but our demand of energy is likely to continue to grow because our economy for the next 20, 30 years is likely to grow to 68%. Now, even if it cannot be totally, the decoupling from growth and energy. It means you continue to grow and you may not, consume more energy. So if we consume more energy, so where this energy is going to come? So is it going to come purely from renewables sources? I think the answer is no, because yes, we may invest more in renewables, but since still I think we have coal resources and other resources, fossil fuels, which are likely to continue to be a very major force for us. So, we'll continue to work in a different kind of paradigm when we are making our energy transition. We'll continue to use coal for quite some time, but at the same time, we are also going to invest also in renewables. But in West, it's different. Consumption is low, so they are investing more in renewable. So overall impact, what we are really looking is that the certain things will keep happening. We are very much concerned about this. So, at a different front, various fronts. So that's why I'm saying we have to work at all levels, the international, regional, G20, G7, BRICS, wherever the possibilities. And of course, we have our own national and the regional plans. This is what I think the way to go, because we can't blame just one West for that. I think at different level, the problem is much larger. It has to be tackled in a much, I think, serious manner. And there, in fact, within COP, when where the responsibility is now, the leadership is with Brazil. Right. They have some issues in the Amazon and others. They have also, but their per capita incomes are also quite reasonably, high.
Right, Professor Sachdev, we'll take this point forward. It's important to point out here that India has committed to net zero by 2070, and India, like many countries, have their nationally determined contributions or NDCs, but India is the only G20 country that has delivered before schedule its commitments as far as COP is concerned. And this is, of course, an opportunity, the visit of the Prime Minister to Brazil, to further bolster cooperation in clean energy and renewable energy. We also expect a pact on this. But for now, we'll take a breather and we'll thank Professor Kumar for joining us. Professor Sachdeva will continue with us. We'll take a breather. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.
Do stay with us.